Welcome to this week's edition of In the Clubhouse with EMD Baseball. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. We're going to talk about the weather today.
Yes.
So this comes up inevitably when you start talking about school lists and target lists and where kids want to go and play. And I think we just need to get this out into the universe so that people can wrap their head around this, because I think there's a little bit of a misconception, specifically with kids in the Northeast who think, well, if I go to Virginia, like I'm down south and like it's going to be warm all the time. And it really isn't the case, right? With guys trying to go down south to play baseball, and the idea of like, well, I'm going to get into warm weather and it's going to be vastly different than being in the state of New Jersey, and I think it gets misconstrued sometimes, and not really fully understanding that if you want to get into that warm weather where it don't really matter what time of year is, you can go outside and play baseball. You kind of got to get to Georgia and Florida, Texas, or California. You probably throw like Louisiana in there, but I mean, shoot, I've opened up at Ole Miss as a coach, and first pitch on Friday was 38 degrees. So it's a little bit of a misconception. Just want to take a minute to kind of talk about this so that people understand kind of when the baseball season starts, how that weather impacts it, and, take a couple minutes to unpack this, since it's something that seems to pop up quite a bit. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think the weather thing is, by and large, when you get to the end of the process, I think it's one of the things that you'll look back and think is not the most important thing. Obviously everyone, this has been going on since the dawn of time, that everyone wants to go play baseball in the South, and it's, for the weather, right? I should say that it's not all that different. Like, obviously, is it going to be a tad bit warmer? Of course it is. Like, that's just the nature of how this country is set up. That said, the baseball is opening up in February and March. Unless you're in Florida, Louisiana, even they had snow this year. Texas, Arizona, I'll throw in there, California. You're going to be playing in suboptimal weather sometimes. And you get into these distinctions of like, well, I don't want to go to this section of the country, but I'm okay with this section. It's like, well, it's geographically, it's kind of the same. The weather is generally the same there. We might be talking about a couple degrees up and down, but for the most part, it's generally the same. And I've just always found it, kind of weird, right? Like, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I've just always kind of thought that like that's such a weird thing to say. Like that's a determining factor in where it is you want to go to school, not, the coaching staff or the program or the level of play, whatever it might be. Like, well, I want to play where it's warm. Like, okay, so does everyone. But, I thought it was interesting just because I remember watching, I don't know, it wasn't opening weekend. I think it was the second weekend of Division I play this year. So we're talking the third week in February. Dartmouth was playing at Texas, and I think it was like 38 or 41 degrees first pitch for all three games. I mean, it was cold enough to where, obviously the guys from Texas were bundled up, but the guys from Dartmouth were, who are from upper New Hampshire, were all in cold weather stuff and jackets and hats and stuff. So, if they think it's cold down there, like it's likely cold. So I think that it's something that, does the weather get a little bit better, in March and, early to mid-March and into April? Yeah, it does. But it's not something where you're playing in 90-degree weather and 26-degree weather. You're playing in 50s and 40s. So it's not necessarily a thing that I think should be a determining factor for you when you're going through your recruiting process. And I think the other side of it too is just that there's way more baseball teams, programs, schools in the Northeast Mid-Atlantic than there generally are in the rest of the country. So if you kind of just narrow your search to one geographic region, based off of weather, you're really cutting out a lot of schools where you could potentially play at solely based on something that is literally out of the control of anybody and can change year to year, day to day, month to month, week to week, you name it.
Yeah, it probably needs to be very low on your list of things that make a difference, right? Now, if you're making a decision between a school in Florida and a school in Pennsylvania, and all things are created equal, yeah, all right, maybe go down to Florida. But to your point, like writing schools off because it's going to be cold there when you start the season. Well, I can tell you, living in Virginia, 2 weeks ago, that cold streak that went through New York, and everybody was complaining up there. Well, it was 35 up in New York City. It was 37 down here. It's really not much different. You're talking about, a 2 or 3 hour drive, 4 hour drive, depending on where you are. You're really splitting hairs when you talk about the weather in terms of the timing of it during the college baseball season. The fact of the matter is that you open up in mid-February, there's very few places in this country, South included, where you're going to go down there and it's going to be 75 and sunny on opening weekend. So don't restrict yourself because of temperatures. That conversation inevitably comes up, and it's something that we seem to have to cover, that we don't need to be closing doors on schools because the average temperature there during the season is 58 and somewhere it's 61. So it had to be said. Wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about it. Don't make that something that's high up on your list of importance, or make that a driving factor in how you go about pulling together your school list, your target list. Like, it needs to be about fit socially, fit academically, fit from a baseball perspective. If it happens to line up that you get to go play in a school in South Carolina or Georgia, awesome. You're probably going to be on the field a little bit more often than you are if you're going to play in Massachusetts. But with the indoor facilities that a lot of programs have, Division 1, 2, and 3, they all have space. You can get better. You can develop. They got weight rooms. They got everything you need anyways. I think the weather should be very low on your list of things that are taken into consideration when you're making a decision about where you want to go to school, or as you start to accumulate a list of schools that you're going to target. I would advise strongly that looking up the temperature averages isn't going to be all that fruitful for you.
No.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I just think that I think you hit the nail on the head, that it's not it should be low on your list of things. If you're comparing two different places at the end of the day, sure. But, I just think it's foolish to wipe out entire sections of the country and schools just solely based on the idea that, I've heard it a billion times, like, want to go south. Like, okay, but it's not all the same. So don't do that, please. All of you that are listening, don't wipe places out solely based on something that's literally out of everybody's control.
Well, I think you had a good example of it the other day. We were talking like, well, if the University of Michigan called,
right,
are you going to be upset about the weather? Like,
right, like you can't tell me that you don't want to go to Western New York, and then University of Michigan or Michigan State calls. It's like, yeah, I'll go there. Like, it's very similar weather conditions in those two places.
Possibly colder.
Could be. Very well could be. But I think it's like, it's all relative, right? Like it's, but I don't think that it's, or I shouldn't say it's relative. I think it's all, in those situations, it's showing you that it's not necessarily as big a concern as you're making it out to be. You're making it out to be you only want to play Division I baseball in the South, instead of, looking for the place that's going to be the right fit for you and using weather as a factor to cross things off the list, because that's why.
Well said. but we'll keep this one short and sweet. Don't let the weather be a determining factor, or at least a guiding. Don't let it be your North Star, if you will.
Ooh, good.
Yeah. Came up with a good one. Tune in next week. We'll have some more tidbits for you. We'll talk recruiting. We'll talk baseball. Talk to you then. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.